Before we immerse ourselves in this thrilling story, remember to hit the subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a cold, silver light over the sprawling Leavitts mansion, which loomed like a giant among the lush, dark trees of Long Island. This estate was more than just a house. It was a fortress of opulence, adorned with towering windows, manicured gardens, and the promise of hidden wealth within. The sprawling grounds were surrounded by high walls, creating an air of exclusivity that was almost palpable. To most onlookers, the Leavitts mansion symbolized unattainable luxury, a dream far out of reach. But for 4 determined criminals waiting at the property's edge, it was the perfect target. Vince, the leader of the crew, stood at the forefront, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the mansion's imposing silhouette. A seasoned criminal, Vince had spent years in the shadows, orchestrating ambitious heists that required meticulous planning. He had studied every inch of this mansion and was confident that tonight would be their final score, the one that would set them up for life. Behind Vince stood Jenna, the agile and sharp-minded thief. She adjusted her gloves, checking her bag of tools with a practiced hand. Known for her quick reflexes, Jenna had a unique ability to spot details others often overlooked, making her invaluable in high-stakes situations. Next to her was Al, the crew's tech specialist. Young but undoubtedly skilled, Al cracked his knuckles nervously, his mind racing with calculations about how best to disable the mansion's complex security system. He had visited the property previously on a different job, gathering crucial intel about the security setup, including the layout of the cameras, alarm systems, and pressure-sensitive floors. This knowledge would prove key as they executed their plan. Finally, there was Gary, the muscle of the operation, standing at the rear. Towering over his companions, his broad shoulders and imposing presence exuded strength. While his mental acumen might not rival that of the others, he was there to enforce brute force if needed. Tonight, his role was simple: handle the heavy loot and deter any unexpected interruptions. "We go in fast, we go in smooth, and we get out clean," Vince instructed, his voice low but authoritative. "Remember, no unnecessary risks. We've done our homework. The alarms will be disabled in minutes, and we'll be in and out before anyone even notices." With a nod from the crew, Al pulled out a sleek device, the latest in tech for bypassing security systems, and his fingers began to dance across the keys. "Just give me a sec to get through the gate security system," he muttered, already absorbed in the task before him. Gary gripped his crowbar tightly, ready for action. "Just tell me where to go, Vince," he said with a delightfully gruff voice, his eagerness evident. Jenna, her gaze fixed on the mansion's rear entrance, interjected calmly, "I'll take the back. You guys head for the main entrance. I can clear any obstacles before you make your move." Impressed by her confidence, Vince nodded. "All right, let's do this." As the crew moved together like shadows, they slipped through the overgrown gardens towards the mansion's back entrance. The high walls surrounding the estate offered a slight reprieve from the watchful eyes of the security system. Vince's mind raced as he recounted their plan one last time, checking for potential hitches. A flawless heist meant executing every detail perfectly, and time was of the essence. Unbeknownst to them, however, Karoline Leavitts, Victor's wife, was very much aware of their approach. Known for her astuteness and familiarity with the mansion's security systems, she had designed and maintained the very technology that currently safeguarded her home. While her husband preferred to stay out of the public eye, Karoline was vigilant, ever aware of potential threats. From her high-tech security room deep within the mansion, Karoline monitored their movements with a wicked glint in her eye. She had been tracking the crew for several minutes and found amusement in their audacity. These thieves, confident in their plan, had no idea about the twists she had in store for them. "Let's have a little fun," she whispered, fingers poised over the control panel. The security systems she had crafted were advanced, designed specifically for moments like this. With a flick of her wrist, she prepared to engage the very mechanisms they believed they had disabled. Tonight, the hunters would soon become the hunted. As the crew slipped through the leafy shadows, the stillness of the night enveloped them. They approached the back door, and Vince took the lead, effortlessly moving past the tall hedges and ivy-covered stone walls. With every silent step, tension built among the thieves. Each had rehearsed this moment too many times to allow doubts to creep in. "Let's stick to the plan," Vince whispered as they neared the door. He motioned to Al. "Get us in." Al knelt by the biometric lock panel, his fingers dancing over the buttons as he focused intently. "Got this," he murmured, his concentration unwavering. The screen blinked challengingly, and Vince felt the weight of their plan resting on Al's shoulders. "You need to hurry, Al," Vince urged, glancing nervously over his shoulder, even though he knew they were concealed well. I know," Al replied, the tips of his fingers twitching nervously. One final sequence entered, and click. The door unlocked with a silent sigh, swinging open just wide enough for them to slip through. The crew stepped cautiously into the dimly lit back hallway, the air thick with an unsettling mix of anticipation and anxiety. The mansion's interior was just as grand as its exterior. Gold-leafed embellishments adorned the walls, and priceless artwork hung in every direction. They moved in silence, their footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. "Let's split up," Vince suggested. "Jenna, you take the east wing. Al and Gary, stick with me. We'll hit the main floor first. Remember to stay in your positions. Communication is key. We meet back here in 10 minutes with whatever we can carry." Jenna flashed a determined grin and nodded. "If I see anything interesting, I'll stash it away." With that, she slipped away, heading for the eastern hall. Vince watched her go, trusting in her instincts. Meanwhile, Karoline watched the crew through her security monitors, slightly chuckling as the cameras relayed each of their movements. "They're so predictable," she mused, a smirk forming on her lips. She initiated a slight adjustment to the security protocol she had installed, diverting the usual feeds to create false images on monitors around the mansion. As Jenna moved to the east wing, the lights on the cameras flickered momentarily, causing a built-in alarm to go off silently in the security room, notifying Karoline of her husband's art collection being approached. Pressing a button, she activated the room's sound system. "Welcome home, Theives," she whispered under her breath, eager to see what would unfold. Jenna moved gracefully through the east wing, feeling the familiar adrenaline rush surge through her veins. Each room showcased lavish furniture and paintings that spoke of history and wealth. As she entered a gallery filled with exquisite art, her eyes widened. This was more than she had anticipated. "Who's there?" she called out, her pulse quickening. She swiftly reached for a small taser hidden in her belt, prepared to defend herself. Emerging from the shadows, a frantic maid named Clara stepped out, her eyes wide with fear. "Please, don't hurt me. I thought I heard someone." Jenna lowered her weapon slightly, assessing the situation. "I'm not going to hurt you. You need to get out of here." Clara looked confused but nodded, trembling. Jenna gestured toward the back door. "Go, quickly." With a quiet thanks, Clara dashed for the exit, leaving Jenna to continue her search. As Jenna moved deeper into the mansion, she discovered a hidden safe behind one of the paintings. Intrigued, she kneeled to examine it, her heart racing. This could be the motherlode. Using her tools, she quickly set to work. Meanwhile, on the main floor, Vince, Al, and Gary were equally busy. They crept through the opulent living area, their eyes scanning for any valuables they could take. Al focused on the sophisticated security panel near the entrance. As he disabled the locks and alarms, Vince led Gary to a wall of vintage wines, labels gleaming under the dim light. "Grab a few of the better bottles," Vince instructed. "These could fetch a good price." Gary grinned, enthusiastically grabbing the bottles and lining them in duffel bags. "You got it, boss." Back in the security room, Karoline monitored her home, adjusting settings as the crew traversed her mansion. She initiated a lockdown on the back exits, trapping the thieves inside without their knowledge. As she watched Al type away on the security panel, she was reminded of his prior visit. "Did you really think you could outsmart me?" she chuckled to herself, fingers poised above the controls, ready to unleash her next surprise. With a determined flick, she engaged the mansion's silent alarm, alerting local security without a sound. The crew was completely unaware of this twist. Panic began to seep into the atmosphere as the heist unfolded. Vince, sensing an unusual pressure in the air, turned to Al. "You done yet?" he asked impatiently. "Almost." "Just a sec." Al's voice was strained as he inputted the last code. Suddenly, alarms started blaring softly from the upper levels. "Let's hurry it up. We need to get what we can and go." Vince shouted, adrenaline coursing. As they gathered items hastily, Karoline had already summoned local security to the vicinity. Sirens began to wail in the distance, and the unmistakable sound of approaching vehicles could be heard. "Guys, we've got company." Jenna's voice crackled through the radio, startling everyone. "I think they're onto us." "Stay calm," Vince ordered, but tension gripped the crew. "What the hell?" Vince exclaimed, scrambling to keep the group composed. "Must be on a timer," Al replied, fingers flying over the keys, a mix of fear and determination washing over him. Al, we need a way out now. I'll override the system," Al shouted, heart hammering as he worked furiously on the panel. Just then, lights flickered ominously, and the entire mansion was plunged into darkness as Karoline executed another maneuver. Amidst the chaos, Gary's massive silhouette moved to the front entrance, thinking they could simply break through. "Let's just go through. We can handle whoever is out there." "No. We stick to the plan," Vince argued, trying to avert panic. "We need to find another exit. It's our only chance." With the alarms blaring and darkness settling in, Jenna realized she was trapped in the East Wing. The panic set in when she encountered a locked door bolted tightly. "What now?" she murmured, disputed in time. A spark of ingenuity struck her. Reassessing the situation, she recalled a ventilation shaft in the room, a plan slowly forming in her mind. "If I can just," she whispered, pushing aside a heavy curtain to reveal an old vent. Tugging at the bolts, she loosened the cover and climbed inside, her heart racing with both fear and exhilaration. This was risky, but it was her only hope of rejoining the team. Meanwhile, Vince and Al managed to reach an adjacent hallway. The sound of police radios crackled nearer. "We're running out of time," Al shouted, panic evident in his voice. Just then, Gary collided with another figure in the dark, a security guard, freshly alerted to their presence. "What do we do?" Gary bellowed, but Vince raised a hand, keeping the team composed. A scuffle ensued, and Vince realized that their plan was collapsing fast. Al decided it was best to create a diversion. "I'll make a noise to draw them away," he suggested. "Go," Vince urged, realizing the crew needed every advantage they could muster. Just then, as Al snuck away, Jenna emerged from the vent, finding her bearings. She heard the confrontation unfolding and sprinted towards the commotion, her instincts kicking in. As Vince dodged the guard's grasp, Jenna appeared from behind, catching the guard by surprise. "Get down!" she yelled, quickly using her taser to incapacitate him. "Nice timing," Vince exclaimed, a mix of relief and gratitude washing over him. With the tension at a fever pitch, they began to gather the remaining valuables. "We need to get out of here now," Jenna urged, pointing towards a narrow service door leading to the side yard. As they made their way towards the exit, the sounds of police sirens drew nearer, and they could hear voices approaching. "Hurry," Vince urged, adrenaline pumping through their veins as they slipped through the service door, hoping to reach the tree line before being detected. Outside, the world was alive with commotion. Lights flashed in the distance, and shouts from officers echoed through the quiet night. "We need to split up," warned Jenna, her eyes darting around. "Stick together, we move as a team," Vince insisted, knowing they had only seconds to make a decision. With sirens blaring and the weight of their luggage heavy in their bags, they dashed towards the woods, the shadows of the trees enveloping them. As they navigated through the thick brush, Karoline watched from her security room, impressed yet frustrated. She had expected tonight to be an easy capture. Instead, she found herself fascinated by the thieves' gritty. Turning her gaze towards the police approaching, she quickly reconnected with them through her control panel. "This isn't over," she whispered, a determined glint in her eye. "You might have evaded capture this time, but I'll ensure you don't escape again." As dawn broke on the horizon, the crew found refuge in an abandoned warehouse a few miles from the Leavitts mansion. It was a dusty, derelict space that had been long forgotten, but it served as a temporary hideout. The thrill of their successful heist faded into the background, replaced by the urgency of their situation. Inside the warehouse, the atmosphere was tense. They gathered around a makeshift table illuminated by a flickering light bulb above. Vince spread out the loot, a mix of stolen art pieces, jewelry, and the valuable wine they had secured. "Okay, let's take stock of what we got," Vince began, sorting through their haul. Jenna examined a silver necklace, its intricacies glinting in the light. "This could be worth a fortune if we find the right buyer." Al busied himself with his laptop, searching for potential markets to sell their collection. "We need a plan," he said, his brow furrowed. "Selling these without drawing attention is going to be tough." "You mean it's going to be impossible?" Gary chimed in, skepticism painting his features. "With the police looking for us, selling anything is like waving a flag." Vince leaned in, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. "We need to lay low for a while. But we can't sit on this stuff forever. We find a fencer who knows the game, someone who can move these quickly and discreetly." Jenna, still riding the adrenaline high from their narrow escape, interjected, "What about Karoline? She's smart. She'll probably try to trace the items after what happened. We need to sell before she gets a whiff of our plans." "Good point," Al agreed, his eyes glued to the screen. "Let's not forget, she's got connections. We can't underestimate her." Gary crossed his arms and frowned. "So, what's the play then? We're exposed, tired, and not exactly operating on friendly turf anymore. If we mess this up, we could end up in prison, or worse." Vince took a deep breath, steeling himself. "We're not giving up. We've come too far for that. First things first, we need to split up and scout for potential buyers. If we stay close to each other, we'll be more noticeable. Al, you're coming with me. Gary and Jenna, you take a different route. Let's meet back here tonight." As the group divided, they slipped into the city with a mix of unease and determination. The scuffles of the night had left a strong impression, and each person felt the weight of their choices. Gary and Jenna ventured into a nearby neighborhood, desperate to find a way to blend in. "You think anyone's going to be out looking for us?" Jenna asked, glancing around. "Yeah, if they know what we look like," Gary replied, grimaced. "We were in the spotlight. But let's focus on finding someone who deals in art or unique pieces. There's always a market for high-value items." Meanwhile, Vince and Al made their way to a run-down part of town, where whispers of the underground trade echoed through alleyways and nightclubs. "We should check out the gallery," Vince suggested, recalling rumors he had heard. "It's where all the art thieves and collectors hang out. They might know someone interested in quick cash." As they approached the gallery, the flickering neon lights cast harsh shadows on the pavement. The air was thick with anticipation and uncertainty, yet Vince remained resolute. Inside, eclectic art covered the walls, some stolen, some simply for show. The dimly lit space was subdued, filled with murmurs of hushed conversations among shady figures. Vince and Al approached the bar, where a grizzled man with a beard, known as Eddie, was polishing glasses. "What can I do you for?" he grumbled, eyeing them. "We're looking to move some valuable pieces. Quick," Vince replied, matching Eddie's glare with confidence. "What kind of pieces?" Eddie questioned with curiosity, leaning in slightly. Al chimed in, "Art, jewelry, the good stuff. You know how it is." He slid a small, intricately carved box onto the counter. "Limited edition. What's it worth to you?" Eddie's eyes narrowed as he examined the box, his face revealing that he was intrigued. "Depends on what else you got." Back at the warehouse, Gary and Jenna scrutinized the valuables they had taken. "What if we just went ahead and tried to sell it ourselves?" Jenna suggested, adrenaline still running through her. "Not a chance," Gary replied sharply. "We need to lay low, remember? You can't just walk into a pawn shop and expect to walk out clean. They'll smell blood. We wait for Vince and Al to come back and then see what they found." As Vince and Al negotiated with Eddie, the atmosphere shifted slightly. They were surrounded by people who seemed to operate on an unspoken code of secrecy. Vince leaned closer to Eddie, trying to appear more grounded in the underworld than he felt. "We have more than just this box," he offered, trying to entice Eddie. "If you can move it fast, we're looking at a bigger deal. We just need a reliable buyer." Eddie considered his options, eyes glinting with newfound interest. "You got something else in mind? Maybe something I can't just pass off as hot?" Just then, another figure approached, a woman with sharp features and an air of authority. She surveyed the four of them with an assertive gaze. "What's this? New blood?" Eddie grinned, gesturing toward Vince and Al. "These guys might have something for you, Common. High-value gear, but they're untested. What do you think?" Common's eyes narrowed, cutting right through Vince and AL's facade. "What do you have that none of the usuals can get their hands on?" she asked, sizing them up. Vince swallowed hard. "We have rare art pieces and vintage jewelry," he said, keeping his voice steady. "Direct from a private collection. Legitimately acquired, of course." It was a gamble, but desperation drove him. Carmen raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but not convinced. "You think you can just walk in here with a tale like that? Prove it, then." Al glanced at Vince, who nodded slightly. They had to take the risk. "Follow us," Vince said, taking the lead as they headed toward a nearby storage unit that held a majority of their haul. Once inside, they revealed their stash, and Carmen examined the items with meticulous care, her assessment intense. "Interesting," she said, a smile slowly forming. "You boys didn't kidnap them, did you?" "Not our style," Vince said with an attempt at levity, trying to ease the tension. Carmen's smile widened slightly, sensing their unease. "If I were to broker a deal, I'd need assurance this isn't a one-time gig. My clients are picky." "Repeat business is what we're interested in," Al jumped in. "We know how to move items discreetly." Carmen considered her options, her mind racing through the possibilities. "All right, I'll set up a meeting with some potential buyers, but you'll have to lay low. If you get caught, then I'm directly implicate, you understand?" "Completely," Vince replied, feeling a flicker of hope. Back at the warehouse, Gary and Jenna waited anxiously. What if they don't come back? Or what if they get caught? Jenna's worry seemed to amplify with each passing moment. "They'll be fine. They know what they're doing," Gary reassured her, but doubt nagged at him. "At least they should be. We need to trust them." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps caught their attention. The heavy creaking of the warehouse door signaled Vince and AL's return. They burst in, excitement shining in their eyes. "Guess who has a foot in the door?" Vince declared, taking the lead. "We found a buyer," Al added, a grin spreading on his face. "And bigger connections." Jenna's eyes widened. "Really? Who? What's the plan?" "We're setting up a meeting with Carmen. She can move our goods quickly and discreetly," Vince explained. "But we have to keep a low profile, stay off the radar. If we want this to work, we have to be smart." Despite the adrenaline of their newfound opportunity, unease still lingered. Gary crossed his arms, skepticism clouding his features. "What's to stop her from just turning us in? She could easily pocket the pieces and disappear." "Carmen isn't like that," Al interjected defensively. "She's established in this world. She wouldn't risk her reputation." "Reputation doesn't mean loyalty," Gary shot back, glancing between Vince and Al. "We need a fail-safe plan in case things go south." Vince nodded, recognizing the need for caution. "You're right. We should prepare an exit strategy. If anything feels off at the meet, we bail. No second chances." With the meeting scheduled for the following evening, the crew spent the day preparing. They meticulously organized their stash, carefully concealing items that were less valuable but could create more intrigue. As night approached, tension buildup filled the warehouse. They ran through the plan repeatedly: where to go, who to talk to, and exit strategies if necessary. "Stay sharp," Vince emphasized, his gaze serious. "We're in unfamiliar territory, and I'm not ready to get captured." Jenna tightened her grip on her taser, feeling the weight of responsibility. "We'll handle it. We've come this far. There's no turning back now." The next evening, they arrived at a dilapidated bar located on the outskirts of the city, where murky shadows mingled with the faint glow of neon lights. It was an unassuming location, perfect for a clandestine meeting. As they entered, they spotted Carmen seated at a corner table, flanked by a couple of shifty-looking characters. "Remember, keep it cool," Vince whispered as they approached. Carmen offered a welcoming nod, her demeanor confident. "Glad you made it," she said, gesturing for them to sit. "Let's get down to business." Vince laid out the items, carefully showcasing the most valuable pieces. Carmen leaned in as her associates eyed the goods with calculating gazes. "These are impressive," she remarked, her voice steady. "But our buyer will want guarantees. Authenticity. History. Something that ensures they won't get involved in any heat." "We have documents to back up the jewelry," Al interjected, sliding a folder across the table. "And we can provide provenance for the artwork." Carmen opened the folder, skimming through the papers. "Good. But let's make this clear. If anything goes wrong, it's on you." Her voice dripped with warning, an implication that echoed in the air. Just as they began discussions, the door swung open abruptly, drawing everyone's attention. A group of uniformed police officers filed into the bar, scanning the room. Vince's heart raced. The last thing they needed was a police raid. "Stay calm," Carmen instructed, her voice low and unyielding. "Act natural." The officers approached the table. One of them, a burly figure with a slight scowl, eyed Carmen suspiciously. "What's happening here? Mind if we take a look at what you've got?" Vince leaned back, heart pounding. "We're just discussing art," he said, trying to suppress the tremor in his voice. "Is that right?" The officer raised an eyebrow. "We've had reports of suspicious activity. You wouldn't happen to know anything about recent thefts, would you?" Vince shot a glance at Carmen, who remained composed yet on edge. "Nothing illegal here, officer," she replied smoothly. "We're simply having a business discussion." "Right," said another officer, narrowing his gaze at Vince and Al. "You two look a bit too polished for this kind of place." Jenna clenched her taser, ready for an emergency. Gary shifted, trying to block the men's view of the table in a protective stance. "Let's see those papers," the officer demanded, moving closer. Time stretched painfully as Vince processed how quickly their situation could escalate. "Sure," Carmen said, her confidence unwavering. "I have nothing to hide." As she pulled out documents to show the officers, Al stepped lightly back, subtly moving their stash away from direct sight while Jenna readied herself for any sudden moves. "Just mind your own business, officers," Carmen said, a firm edge in her tone. "We're in a private meeting, a legit one." The officers exchanged glances, unsure about the tension filling the air. For a moment, it felt like the room was holding its breath. "Let's finish up here quickly, then," the burly officer concluded. "And stay out of trouble." Carmen flashed a tight-lipped smile as the officers turned to leave, but not before one caught sight of the folder. "Nice try, but we'll be keeping an eye on this establishment," he called back, exiting with his team. As the door swung shut behind them, Vince let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. That was too close. Carmen shot them a look, a mix of irritation and amusement. "You have to be sharper. You think I run a daycare here? We didn't ask for a police visit." "Trust me, we just want this done," Vince snapped back, frustration boiling over. "We need to finish this deal." "Fine, let's close this right now," Carmen said, shifting the mood back to business. "The guy you're selling to will buy at a cool price, but if that tension rises again, there's no telling where this goes." They plunged back into discussions, securing the sale while remaining hyper-aware of their surroundings. Tensions remained, but they pushed through, determined to escape unscathed. Once the deal was struck and they had the cash in hand, the crew left the bar in a haze of relief and adrenaline. They made their way back to the warehouse, where a sense of victory flickered in the air. "Not bad," Gary admitted, though still cautious. "But we need to lay low for a while. This isn't over yet." "Yeah, we've got to disappear," Vince agreed. "We can't risk being out in the open after this. Let's find a safe house and make our next moves from there." As they plotted their next steps, the weight of their adventure began to settle into an uneasy acceptance. The thrill, the risk, and the reality of their choices were intertwined in ways they couldn't fully comprehend yet. As the crew settled in for the night, a fragile sense of relief washing over them, they were unaware that Carmen remained parked down the street, a low hum of anticipation filling her car. She had secured her payout, but the game was far from over. The crew's faces, their names, their weaknesses, all recorded, all useful. She wouldn't make a move tonight, but tomorrow would be different. Inside the warehouse, the team tried to unwind, but sleep was a distant prospect. The adrenaline still coursed through their veins, and the knowledge that they were now significantly wealthier, but also significantly more exposed, kept them on edge. "All right," Vince announced, breaking the tense silence. "We're sitting on a mountain of cash, but we can't spend it here. We need to disappear, change identities, and get out of the city. Immediately." Al nodded, tapping away on his laptop. "I'm already on it." I know a guy who can get us fake IDs and off-the-grid travel arrangements. It won't be cheap, but it's our best shot." Jenna paced the warehouse, the familiar thrill of a successful heist mingling with a growing sense of unease. "What about Karoline? She knows what we took. She'll be looking for us, or worse, she'll be after her valuables." Gary, ever the pragmatist, interjected, "We need a plan to move the remaining assets. We can't transport it all at once. We'll need to stash it somewhere, a safe house where we can regroup. Somewhere well hidden." "I know just the place," Vince said, a rare smile touching his lips. "My uncle used to have a cabin upstate. It's abandoned, off the grid, and perfect for laying low." The plan solidified. The following morning, Al would reach out to his contact for the IDs and travel arrangements. They would gather the remaining valuables, split the loot, and head north. The next morning arrived, bringing with it a sense of urgency. The warehouse felt colder, less secure than before. They were no longer just a crew of thieves, they were fugitives. Al secured fake IDs, a change in name, new travel arrangements, and a promise of a clean slate. The final item on the list, the safe house. They divided the remaining loot into 3 separate caches. One to the fake identities and safe house, another to a lawyer Al knew that was on his payroll, and the final one to be hidden for a later date. As they prepared to leave, Gary eyed Vince. "You sure about this cabin?" Vince nodded. "Trust me. No one will find us there." They packed their essentials, and split into groups, Al and Vince in one car, Jenna and Gary in the other. A sense of foreboding filled the air, an unspoken acknowledgement that their lives were about to change irrevocably. The drive north was a blur of interstate highways, small towns, and endless stretches of forest. The tension in the cars was palpable, each of them grappling with their own fears and anxieties. Al and Vince shared tense silences, their eyes constantly scanning the rearview mirror. Jenna and Gary, on the other hand, shared a mixture of exhaustion and relief. The world, so alive with danger, was quickly fading into the past. As the hours passed, they began to relax slightly, allowing themselves to believe they were outrunning the city. But the past, as they would soon learn, has a way of catching up. Their escape hit a snag when they reached a small, rural town. One of the cars had a flat tire, and the only mechanic for miles was closed. "Damn it," Vince swore, staring at the punctured tire. "It's okay," Al said, trying to remain calm. "We can fix it. Just give me a minute to change it." Jenna and Gary arrived just as Al got to work with the tire. As Al struggled with the lug nuts, a police cruiser slowly approached. The officer inside, a young man with a bored expression, eyed them with suspicion. "Everything all right here?" he asked, his voice flat. Vince forced a smile. "Just a flat tire, officer. No big deal." The officer's gaze lingered on them, his eyes narrowing. "You wouldn't happen to be having any problems? Your plates look unfamiliar." A wave of panic washed over Vince. He glanced at Al, who was sweating profusely. "We're just passing through, officer," Al interjected, hoping to defuse the situation. The officer remained unconvinced. He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I'm running a check on a vehicle with out-of-state plates." Vince knew they were running out of time. Vince, without hesitating, made a sudden move. He grabbed the tire iron from Al's hands and smashed the officer's window. The officer, startled, jumped back, reaching for his gun. "Run!" Vince yelled at his friends, pushing Al and Jenna toward their car. "Go. I'll hold them off." Gary hesitated, torn between loyalty and self-preservation. He looked at Vince, who nodded, urging him to leave. With heavy hearts, Gary, Al, and Jenna sped off, leaving Vince behind. As they sped away, Gary, Al, and Jenna were racked with guilt and worry. They knew Vince was capable, but the odds were stacked against him. "What do we do?" Jenna asked, her voice trembling. "We can't just leave him." "We have to," Al said grimly, steering the car. "We're fugitives now. Going back would be suicide." They continued north, the weight of their actions growing with every mile. Every siren, every flashing light, sent a jolt of fear through their bodies. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the cabin. It was a rustic, isolated structure deep in the woods, a testament to the passage of time. It was just as Vince had described, well hidden and far off the grid. Inside, the cabin was dusty and sparsely furnished. They quickly unloaded the car and barricaded the doors and windows. "We need to find a way to contact him, see if he's okay," Jenna said, her voice laced with pain and worry. "It's too risky," Al said. "Any communication could lead them right to us." They were trapped in a no-man's land of their own making, cut off from the world and haunted by their choices. The following days were a blur of anxiety and paranoia. They spent their time listening for any sign of pursuit, every rustle of leaves, every distant sound, making them jumpy and afraid. One evening, Al was exploring the cabin, when he found a hidden room behind a bookshelf. Inside was a series of computer equipment that hadn't been used in a decade. He saw the possibilities. He quickly got to work on the equipment, and within a few hours he had it up and running. He was able to start a message chain with his lawyer. "I need to know how Vince is," he typed. The lawyer replied quickly. "I have some news. The police have found him and he's in the hospital. He's asking for you." The news hit them like a punch to the gut. They knew that the police would be looking for them, but now they had a decision to make: go back and visit Vince, or stay put and stay safe. They stared at each other, wrestling with the dilemma. Gary wanted to go and see him, but Jenna worried about putting them all in more danger. In the end, Al put it to a vote. The vote was split, 2-1 in favor of going back. "All right, we head back. We'll go at night, avoid the main roads." "Stay alert," Al declared. Under the cloak of darkness, they made their way back to the city. Their fear was soon met with a heavy dose of reality when they arrived at the hospital. Police presence was everywhere. They managed to slip past the security and eventually found Vince's room. He was lying in bed, his face bruised, but alive. "You came," he rasped, a weak smile on his face. "We would have always come back," Al said, a sense of relief washing over him. "Listen," Vince said, his voice barely a whisper. "There was something else in the house that you need to go back for. It's hidden in a secret compartment behind the fireplace. It could save us." Before he could say more, a nurse entered the room, followed by 2 police officers. "Visiting hours are over," one of the officers said, his eyes narrowed. They knew this meant more trouble as they were being escorted out. Jenna glanced back at Vince. He gave her a subtle nod and a meaningful look. The key message they had received would change everything. They knew what they needed to do. They returned to the abandoned cabin. They quickly found the secret compartment and discovered a hidden USB drive. The drive contained a complete log of Karoline's activities, her hidden accounts, and her criminal enterprise. They realized that Carmen was not their only threat, but that Karoline and her organization were also after them. As they were putting their plan into action, the cabin door was blasted open. Carmen stood in the doorway, along with several armed men. "You've been a very bad crew," Carmen said with a smile. "Now give me the drive, and you might walk away from this." As the battle between them began, they knew they had a chance to stop the madness. Vince knew that they needed to fight. This was their final test. The final battle was about to begin. They grabbed what weapons they could and braced themselves for a final showdown. The cabin erupted in gunfire and chaos. Gary, Al, and Jenna fought with ferocity born of desperation, using every advantage they could find. The scene was set, and all the pieces fit. This was a battle for their lives. They needed to fight to survive and to right the wrongs they had done. They found that the strength of the group, the bond of friendship, and the lessons from each trial had molded the best of them. At the end of the chaos and fighting, only one team could be victorious. As they defeated Carmen and her men, they were able to escape. They were able to disappear with the evidence in hand. They knew what needed to be done. They used the information on the USB drive to expose Karoline and her criminal network. The police swarmed Karoline's properties. Their old lives are gone. Their new lives are uncertain. They are living the lives they have always wanted. If you enjoyed this epic story, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel Inkless Echo for more thrilling narratives.